Hello, welcome to our continuing devotional through the book of Colossians. Today we're in Colossians chapter 2, looking at verses 18 and 19, which say this: Let no one disqualify you, insisting on asceticism and the worship of angels, going on in detail about visions, puffed up without reason by his sensuous mind, and not holding fast to the head, from whom the whole body, nourished and knit together through its joints and its ligaments, grows with a growth that is from God. Again, Paul is doing just as he was doing in the previous verses. He's warning these Christians about not getting sidetracked by harmful, unhelpful, and even dangerous spiritual teaching. Previously, he spoke about legalism. We talked about that in our last devotional. In these two verses, he speaks about asceticism and mysticism. Asceticism and mysticism. And I'm going to briefly explain what both of those are. He actually mentions asceticism in verse 18. He says, let no one disqualify you insisting on asceticism. For those unfamiliar with that word, that refers to kind of this self-inflicted uh, denial of your basic needs, self-inflicted injury, undue harsh treatment of the body, all of this in order to please God, in order to overcome sin and Satan. It's basically when we somehow restrict ourselves, unnecessarily restrict the needs of our body, the needs of our life, because we think somehow that makes us better or more right with God or helps us to grow spiritually. So things that might be related to asceticism today are like when people take a vow of silence or a vow of poverty, believing that somehow being silent for the next 20 years has any real impact on their relationship with God, or somehow being impoverished is beneficial to their spiritual walk. Other examples of asceticism are denial of certain food on certain days. You see that I can't eat meat or I can't do this. Insistence on celibacy instead of marriage. As if that makes you more right with God. Where marriage is something God has blessed. There are even examples in history and still today of self-flagellation where people beat themselves with whips because they think that atones for their sin or makes them right with God. People go on long pilgrimages. They insist upon long, lengthy prayer times of dozens of hours. They go in without sleep. And I could go on, and you may or may not have run into these things, but throughout history, there have been Christian false teachings that have kind of wormed their way into the church that insist upon these kind of bodily harsh treatment because somehow that's supposed to help us in our relationship with God. The other thing he mentions in this verse is mysticism. We could also call this supernaturalism. Now, we're not in any way saying that God doesn't work through the supernatural means. He does. But mysticism, which is referred to here in verse 18 as the worship of angels, visions, being puffed up without reason, refers to those who get focused and sidetracked. Instead of focusing on Jesus, the Word of God, growing, they begin focusing on like angel visits and visionary experiences. And they go into great detail, Paul says here, about what they saw. They had this experience. But that's not supposed to be our focus. That's not supposed to be our pursuit. And many times it's actually leading us away from a true understanding and relationship with God. What matters is Jesus. Don't get focused on these wrong things. He says here in verse 19 that they're not holding fast to the head when they get focused on asceticism or mysticism or supernaturalism. The head is Jesus. It is in Jesus that the whole body is nourished and knit together and grows. Focus on Jesus. Everything that's right should lead us to Jesus. And when something distracts us from focusing on Jesus, it's very likely something that's not healthy, not wholesome, and not good for us. So be very careful that nothing distracts you from Jesus, not legalism, not asceticism, and not mysticism, which are the three things he particularly mentions to this church. I hope you'll consider these things. Have a blessed day.